So I guess we'll get started, and I'll just kind of explain how we'll structure the event. MMCTV is sponsoring this event, a Q&A with the candidates for select board. We'd like to do this whenever there's a contested election in our town, and I guess the last time was during the pandemic. And Eric, we were all doing it remotely, so kind of nice to be able to see people in person, but also have the benefits of the pandemic of people being able, the benefits, that came out wrong, of the technology that advanced during that time, so that we're able to have people join us for whatever reason they can't make it, which is pretty amazing, I think. Excuse me? Hello?
Can you turn the recording on Zoom?
Thank you. And that is the conscious of MMCTV, which is Aaron Wag. Thank you, Aaron. Yes, we will record this on Zoom too. Thank goodness. We have Aaron.
Recording in progress.
You could do it a million times, but you never get used to all the Zoom protocols. So the way we're structuring the conversation tonight, and it's not like a maybe presidential debate you've seen, where it's like a debate with a lot of back and forth between everybody and rebuttals and smart one-liners. Well, I'm sure there could be a lot of smart one-liners,
not for
but
me.
The way we structure it is that everybody gets a chance to respond to every question. And kind of the main stars, I'm sorry, Eric, tonight are Peter Booth and Joe Flynn, who are running for the 2-year seat, which is contested to fill. To fill out the last remaining year of the
Wayne House term.
Wayne House.
Fill out the last year of a 3-year seat.
Thank you. I'm glad you guys know what you're running for. And of course, Eric is running to for the 3-year seat uncontested, which he is currently occupying. So we will start with candidates having a chance to tell us a little bit about who they are and why they're here, why they're interested in running for this position in their town, in our town. And then we're going to have an opportunity to field some questions. And folks out on Zoom, if you have questions you want to enter into the chat, please do, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. We have an hour. We're going to try to stick to it as much. And if we run out of questions, that's okay. We'll just get all the good ones in early. And then we have a few folks here that can also ask their questions as they see fit. And yeah, so I guess we'll get started. And then, just a word, at the very end, you will also get a chance, after you've said your bit, to say anything else, that lingering last thing that you want to sort of round out your comments tonight. So I guess we'll get started. Maybe we'll start on the end with Peter Booth. So if you could say a little bit about yourself.
Sure. My name is Peter Booth. I have lived in Jericho since 1992, when my wife and I bought a house here. We have raised 4 kids here. During my time at Jericho, right out of the gate, I got involved in the community. I think it was in 1992 when I was coaching Little League and on the Jericho Conservation Committee, Conservation Commission, and then I did a couple stints on the Underhill ID school board and did a stint on the Mount Mansfield school board. And then more recently, I was on the Planning Commission and on the Affordable Housing Committee. I've done a lot of things around town in terms of town government and town service. And one of the things I haven't done before, obviously, is the select board. And I'm a teacher, and my professional life is winding down. I'm 1 year from retirement. And my parenting life has not ended by any means, but has slowed down significantly, and I feel like I have the time and interest and ideas to pursue the select board and help kind of Jericho move into whatever's next for it.
So I guess we'll go in order.
Sure. I'm Joe Flynn. First, I want to say thanks for setting this up. We appreciate the opportunity to offer some comments and so on without having to walk on the streets in the winter. But anyway, I'm Joe Flynn. I moved here in 1991. I married my high school sweetheart. We lived on Route 15. We have 2 beautiful children and 2 beautiful grandchildren. I've served the community for roughly 25 years in some sort of youth sports. I've served the community on DRB for 11 years, served my profession as a land surveyor for probably 20-some now. I just enjoy serving. I enjoy serving my community. I look at Jericho as being my kind of adopted town. I love the history, love the people, and like I said, I had great experiences raising my children here. So again, I'm here to continue to serve the town in the best capacity that I can.
And I'm Erik Johnson. So I decided to run 3 years ago, and I did win that election, and so I've been on the select board for 3 years. One thing I will say is it takes a little bit of getting used to. I feel like I'm just now getting the hang of it. And so that's part of the reason that I'm running. There's still a lot left for us to do, and I'm also interested in seeing some of the things through that we've got started and tackling some of the big problems that we're trying to work through.
So I'm going to throw this question right back at you, Erik, since you've done this the longest. So what in your mind is the role of a select board member in Jericho now? And how does that kind of compare for when you started 3 years ago, what you thought it would be like, and what parts of the roles are you kind of learning more about, and what are maybe some surprises with this position, like what's involved with it that you didn't expect, or maybe that you enjoy more than you thought?
So when I ran the first time, so I'll answer the part about what is the same, is when I ran the first time, I thought a lot of it was listening to the constituents and really trying to get a pulse of the town, not just the handful of people that show up to the meetings, but the whole town, and trying to, as things come up, try to figure out the best way to sort of serve them, but really listening to both sides. So I still feel that very strongly. What is surprising is how much procedure there is to learn. There's a lot of, they give you a book, which helps, but it's pretty thick and it's pretty specific, and, like learning some of the, for example, when we adopted the town plan, all sounded great. The planning commission came up with a really good plan. They did great work on it, but the specific procedural stuff to get it through was very, very detailed and specific and complex. And so I think that was probably the most surprising for me. I would think like, oh, we've got a couple months until we get that. Well, no, it's got to be done by this date, but that requires this statutory date, which requires 2 meetings before. So, you get backed up in a hurry of like, oh, so that means we got to start thinking about this in May so we can have a meeting in August. So so I think those have been probably the biggest surprise for me.
This is kind of convenient. We can go in order here. So how about you? How is it? I guess you're a couple months into serving part of Wayne House term. Like, how's the learning curve been? How has that compared to what you? Tell us a little bit about the role of the select board member in your eyes.
I see the select board member as being basically business people running a town. The state statutes and rules and what we practice under really does a good job in defining how we run it. Just like Erik said, there's specific dates, procedures, and so on we have to follow. So again, the position of a select board, I just don't see it as political. I see it as a business person having to run the town for the residents. As far as learning curve, my God, yes. Huge learning curve. The biggest aspect for me has been basically understanding the budget process and getting a handle on that and seeing where our money goes and allocations and what's due when, and looking not just next year but the next 5 years. So for me, the biggest hurdle is understanding the budget.
And I think it's certainly a sign of a healthy community when people will run for seats and the seats will be contested. So that's kind of great. So just a little Jericho comment. And how about you, Peter? Like, what do you see the role as select board member in, without having done it?
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting how we all bring our own lenses to it. Like, Joe, you see it like it's like running a business and you're making decisions. And the analogy that I think of as a school teacher of 34 years is I feel like, oh, the select board is sort of like a legislative body, sort of like the school board, and then you have staff and employees you have a town manager or town administrator, and they're sort of implementing the stuff and implementing the desires of the select board, and the select board is then sort of you know, we always say that the school board, all school board does is pass a budget and set policy, and then everything else gets done by the people who do the work. And I don't think it's quite that simple, and things do pop up on school boards, but I think it's similar in that where you're sort of the body that is setting the policy and the direction, and then staff are implementing that. I am for sure wary of the that if I get elected on town meeting day, as of that moment, Erik and I can't talk about Jericho at all because there's only 3 people on the board. And so I actually, with school vacation coming up, I set up a meeting, and I said, Erik, I'd like to talk with you. Maybe I win, maybe I don't, but either way, if I win, we can't talk about the select board at all, and I'd like to just talk with you and just see sort of what is hard, what's easy, what ideas do you have that I should know about, what things tripped you up when you started, and like you got elected, Erik, and couldn't talk to anybody, you know. So I set up meetings with Erik and Catherine just to sort of have a conversation, and so I can hit the ground running and not sort of have to sit down with the book and try and figure it all out myself, but be able to have sort of an insider's conversation about what does it mean to be on the select board, and what do I need to know about the procedures, and not getting caught up in the sort of like, oh, it's going to take actually 9 months to do this, to just pass the town plan.
So definitely not an easy job.
For sure.
So I'm going to get into just a few of the questions that were sent to us that I actually had sent to the candidates in advance. And let's get straight to roads, okay? Because that is like always a very popular topic around this time of year before town meeting day and at town meeting. So we received a question about traffic calming measures, and it was kind of specific about a specific part on Brown's Trace, slowing to 25 miles per hour. I'll read it because I won't summarize it. So do you agree that maintaining a well-deserved travel space in transition zones such as Jericho Center is essential to improving traffic safety and enhancing community livability? Will you support and work for traffic calming efforts as proposed by the GCPA and include painting fog lines on Brown's Trace at a reduced width than the normal in the vicinity of Jericho Center? And I think just the gist of this is so that it's visibly different than the 35 miles per hour zone. I'm just summarizing the end of this because it is very specific. So maybe a land surveyor has a comment about this. So maybe we'll start with Joe to make it a little easier for us. Sure. So what do you think about this?
So if I remember correctly, that's from Bernie.
Yes.
Okay. And I definitely support it. With actually, this discussion we had at one meeting, Bernie was questioning if we could do this and so on. The alteration of fog lines is fairly simple, fairly inexpensive to do to calm traffic. As far as other avenues, again, I believe this was Jericho Preservation. What's the committee?
JCPA? Yeah. I must
I think it's Jericho Center Preservation Association,
Committee.
I think.
They had a wonderful presentation to us a month or so ago about all these ideas, and again, it's positive information that they want to offer. So yes, I do support it. The only stumbling block we have is finding a contractor available to repaint our fog lights. There's not a lot of them out there, and we struggle with simple supply and demand on that. But yeah, as far as all that, I'm especially in that area, I'm in favor of it.
How about you, Peter?
Yeah, I agree. I remember we painted, the town painted the fog lines, I think all along Brown's Trace, I'm going to say 5 or 6 years ago. And I'm a bicyclist, so I noticed that. And I felt like it really didn't have much of an effect, that just painting the lines to visually close the road didn't really have the effect that I think people were hoping that it would have. And the lines got rubbed off pretty quick because people just kind of rode on top of those fog lines. So I'm not sure that actually is an effective method, but I think that the moving of the fog line, I think it's all kind of a visual, what you see happening in front of you on the road, and I think that the more that you can increase the sense of arrival as you come into, in particular, Jericho Center area, and certainly the speed bump in front of Desso's and bringing in the lines would increase that level of that sense of arrival. I think we could use the same sort of gateway effect or arrival effect where I live down Riverside. where cars go ripping through there real quick, and any sort of calming measures that actually are effective and work, I think would be fabulous, and I would wholeheartedly support.
Eric, do you have any thoughts on traffic calming?
I do support Bernie's suggestion of narrowing the fog lines, but like Peter, I wonder how much it's going to work. But we do need to do something through that center. I don't know if you've tried to get out of the car there, and you know, it's one place for sure that people really need to go slow. So I don't know what actually slows people down, but I'm willing to try. I think that's a cheap enough solution to try, but I think it probably does take a couple more things.
And I'm just going to pause for a minute here and see, do you happen to have a question back there, or are you just listening in right now?
Basically listening.
Okay.
And they have questions later.
When you do have a question, feel free to come and sit right at the mic, and then we will be ready to take your question. Being in the room is great. And then if somebody on Zoom has a question, if they could raise their hand or indicate in the chat, and we'd be happy to take your questions as we go. So traffic calming, there was some agreement. Let's get into a little more controversial road question. I don't want to say raceway, but let's talk about which has stirred up a lot of emotions year after year, I would say. I remember this discussion in the 80s. Can you say a few words about what the role of like how you feel about the way the town of Jericho is dealing with its dirt roads as time goes on versus paving? Like, do you feel like the policy and the procedures that they're doing make sense? Are they out of date? Is it? Maybe I'll start with Eric this time. Going straight to the heart of controversy.
Take it away, Eric.
Or what could be improved, let's say, or what direction could we take to have a little more? Nobody's ever going to be completely happy, let's face it. There's no like win-win. But
Yeah, I like how you put it, that it stirs up a lot of emotion. It really does. So first off, I am quite impressed with our road crew. They do a lot with a pretty small crew, and you know, efficiently, and for the money that we spend on it, I think we get a lot of value for our money. As far as what the right way how to deal with dirt roads and should we pave some of them, paving is just so much money that it's really hard to it's hard to think about that in the terms of some of the other priorities that we have. I don't have a great answer on roads, I'll be honest with you. As soon as you pave them, then you're going to be worried about speeders. It's just like when you grade it. As soon as you grade the road and get it nice and smooth, people will complain about people going too fast. As soon as it falls apart, people will complain about ripping their cars apart. So, and I don't blame anybody for any of these concerns, but it is a tough one. So I'm just going to leave it at that.
okay, so maybe I'll hop over to Peter and see as a cyclist if there's thoughts about this.
Yeah, I agree with much of what Eric said. And I live right sort of on 15, kind of at the end of Raceway, not on Raceway, but right down there. And so I traveled a lot, and I have two boys who travel a lot. And a couple of weeks ago when it blew up on Front Porch Forum, it was literally unpassable. I went to drive down it, and you couldn't. I was below walking pace and just falling into these gullies right in the middle of the road that couldn't be avoided. And I'm not a professional on this at all and don't have any kind of professional insight or opinion, but it's what I've heard a lot over, not just in the last weeks, but over years and years and years, is this idea that that we keep just adding dirt and kind of layering it out, and that people have talked about how it's like a 8-inch drop from the road into their driveway. And at we had the meeting last week about the bike path idea, which was going to butt into Raceway, and there was a lot of talk about Raceway at that time. And someone at that meeting mentioned, like, it's time to, this isn't me talking, it's quoting somebody who said, we need to go back and just tear the whole thing up back to the base and then kind of start over again, that we've been adding dirt for over and over and over, and sort of it's not working. We need to go back and kind of rebuild it, which is also, I think, incredibly expensive. And I think then begs the question, well, if we're going to do that, why not just pave it? And I think that Eric's right, that the minute you pave that road in particular, I think it actually gets dangerous.
I think it becomes a raceway.
Yeah, yeah.
So you're agreeing, so I'm curious, how about you? Do you feel like the policy, what's in place, is kind of the way it has to be? Or could something be changed about the way the roads are dealt with?
Yeah, so I do have just a few thoughts on that. In regards to like raceway being the typical, but it isn't just raceway. We've got a lot of dirt roads that certain times of the year they're really difficult to maintain. My first comment on that, I wish we had a bigger road crew so we could maintain the roads better. You know, as Peter said, cutting it down. Well, maybe we could have, if we could hire more on the road crew and keep them, then maybe we can manage our roads better. Maybe we do have the staff to cut the road down on a regular basis, pull out material, store it, bring it up to the garage and hold on to it, and then put it back down when we need to. But it boils down to that there's certain times of the year, if it's a gravel road, there's not much we can do about it. All right, the ground's frozen, we have potholes. It thaws, we get ruts. It freezes, we get frozen ruts. The only way to fix it, or short term, is put more dirt on it. When we get spring comes around, everything dries off, maybe we grade it off. But it all boils down to our staff and have the ability to do it. And we really don't have that right now. So we do some short-term fixes. As far as paving and not to pave, for me it's data driven. You know, Chittenden County Regional Planning has criteria for how many trips before it's favorable to pave. And even then, you've got half want it paved and half don't. Right. So you also have you remember that it's a town road. Now, while you live on it, you believe it's your road, but it is everybody's road too. So you have to weigh in that. So there's 100 variables. I just would like to see a town road crew with sufficient staff to maintain our roads.
Okay. So I'm going to put it out there again, if the folks on the Zoom, and I see a few people there, if they would like to pose any questions. There is one I have from the DEI committee, but I'm not sure if Maria you'd like to say it yourself, or I can read it.
You can go ahead and read it if you
okay.
don't have it right in front of me. I appreciate it though.
Yeah. So this question was sent in for all the candidates from the Jericho DEI committee. And the question is, what are your ideas for making Jericho's Declaration of Inclusion a living statement and not a performative statement? So I guess I'll start with Joe.
I'm going to be honest. I don't know if Maria can describe the difference. I guess I don't understand what the difference is. If someone could tell me the difference between the living and the performance, I guess I can. I'm unsure.
Maria, do you want to elaborate on this? What I was taking away was like, you know, if it's just going to be words, or if we want to take active actions to support that statement. That was my take on it. If
that is the take, then definitely it should be a living thing. I mean, that's why we have the DEI to help bring these ideas to the community. So yeah, it should be. I mean, we went to efforts to try to make our town plan correspond with this premise. So yeah, definitely, it should be a living, changing, integrated thing.
How about you, Erik?
Yeah, I had the same question, but that was kind of my take, is that I take the question as, okay, you've got this, but how do you put it into place? And it's a pretty sensitive area that I get into listening mode very quickly when it comes to that. Like, what can we do? What does help? You know, the DEI committee has come through with some good suggestions. One of them that came to the select board was the consideration of making town meeting be 100% Australian ballot. I think that's huge. That's a huge step, and the committee had some very good data. They surveyed the community. They had some really good reasons, enough so that, at least personally, from the select board, I was willing to put the motion. I mean, it has to be a floor vote to vote for it to be an Australian ballot, part of the procedural stuff I was talking about. So it was enough to make me put that out there for a vote. So yeah, I want it to be a living thing, and I want to know what actions we can do that does make make it feel more inclusive to everybody.
How about you, Peter? How about how do you think there could be more flesh and bones on this idea that we see?
Yeah, the lens that I, when I hear the word inclusion, the lens that I sort of instinctively view it through is that of ableness and ability and disability. I have 4 kids, several of whom have pretty significant disabilities, and as my wife and I are getting older and thinking about like what's up for our kids after we're gone, you know, my son Jesse cannot live in Jericho. It's not possible for him to settle in Jericho as a renter or as a home buyer, and what feels, I feel like what's the most exclusionary thing about our town is the affordability, that you just can't get a foot in the door unless you have significant, I think, essentially family money. You have someone backing you. You can't get in the door. And so when I think about inclusion, I tend to think of my own kids and their needs, but I think that crosses over to all levels, you know, all different types of diversity, you know, sexual, racial, and a lot of those come down to me, come back to me around affordability being the thing that the town should be thinking about in terms of trying to diversify our population and make our town accessible to all people.
So can we jump into affordable housing? Is that okay?
Sure.
I mean, like you kind of have to nowadays. It seems like it's like this huge topic as we talk about the aging Vermont population. Everyone's like, there's not enough kids. If you look at the makeup of a lot of neighborhoods, they used to have kids there, and now there's like one person in this huge house. So what are your thoughts on that? Let's start with Erik.
So how do we? So sounds like your question is, how do we get more affordable housing?
Well, what can the select board do to encourage this in some way, or the town?
So I think the biggest thing that's within the select board's control that's coming up is the rewrite of the zoning regulations, which is right now the planning commission is looking at that, but that new town plan is the first step towards that. To me, reducing, you know, exclusionary zoning, you hear all the time. I heard it on NPR just this week, and they weren't even talking about Vermont. They were talking somewhere else. It seems to me like that is one method that is squarely in our control, that we have control over. There's other things, you know, obviously like utilities, getting water and wastewater, all those things make building smaller units possible. That is another thing, but to me that feels a little more out of reach, whereas a zoning, we have almost full control over that. And we're certainly doing a study on the wastewater study, and we're doing everything that we can, but those regs seem very tangible very soon compared to the length of time some of the other options might take.
How about you, Joe? Like, what steps do you think the town could maybe take? What changes could happen to make this a town that's more affordable?
Well,
for housing?
Erik's right on with a lot of my thoughts too. So, again, there's 2 ways I guess I see that the select board can impact affordable housing: is direct or indirect. Direct would be the select board is the chief leader. They're actually the developer. Here's where it's going to go. We're going to make sure it gets in, and so on. That can work, but typically the only time you'll see that is with large municipalities, and they want to do a overall project. We're small, okay? So I prefer, as like Erik said, is indirect. What can we do with our zoning regulations to make it attractive to build here? It always is going to boil down to affordable housing, the number of units, and making it attractive to build in Jericho. And Erik's right. Wastewater, services, municipal water. We need to look at density based upon the engineering aspects of a lot, and not just how big the building is or what the coverage is or how, you know, minimum lot size. So we as a select board can work with planning commission and the zoning to rewrite the regs to make it attractive so people want to build here and accommodate bonuses for houses that are at 1,250 square feet and not at 2,200 square feet. So you bring in smaller, denser houses and so on, you get bonuses for it. If you want to do a smaller house and you want to do 10 as opposed to 5 huge houses, all right, now we'll give you a bonus, an extra 10%, another unit goes in. So that's just resonating with more details what Erik said. That's how we're going to get affordable housing in here.
How about you, Peter? How do you see this issue, and what do you think that the town could influence?
I think that everything that Joe and Erik said is true around streamlining the regulations and making it more viable to develop here and more attractive to develop here. I do think that for the most part, that's going to allow more development, but not necessarily more affordable development. I think that that I would love for the town to take more of a proactive leadership role around that, and some sort of private-public partnership around looking at development in the area. Is it the Jericho Development Corp? Is that the group that when the Rivers property was being talked about, that up along Plains Road there was the quarter-acre zoning, and there was talk then of putting affordable housing up there and establishing this Jericho Development Corp and having the town, I don't know if it was take a leading role, but taking a role in developing affordable housing in sort of a proactive way, rather than sort of just removing restrictions and hoping that it happens. I think that a developer can generally make more money if they build a big fancy house for $1 million than if they build a 5-unit apartment building or a condo or a duplex or a triplex. So I think that it's not just a matter of taking away restrictions and letting capitalism do its thing. I think that there needs to be more proactive explicit efforts to make affordable housing happen, rather than sort of setting up the stage for it and hoping it happens.
So again, if you're online, don't be shy, or in the room, the mic is still there. I did want to also, so there's nobody, I don't want to interrupt them if they're about to ask something. Don't be shy. You can also type it into the chat, and we'd be happy to address it. So sorry, Peter, but I'm going to put you a little on the spot with the next question, because everyone's just agreeing too much, I guess. So we did want a friendly conversation, but come on, let's see some contrast here. So somebody wrote in that they were a little unhappy with your Front Porch Forum post because you had lots of great ideas, but then I think somewhere about recreation and housing and infrastructure. But you say we probably don't have enough money to do all these things I talked about, and they're frustrated because they're like, geez, why are you telling us all these ideas if there's no money behind it to do these big visions you have, Peter? Mm-hmm. Let's get back to reality. What's going on? So if you could, just to make this applicable to the others as well, I'm sure you all have great ideas that are big ideas. So how can the select board member, take at least, like, if there was one big idea you could sort of usher through that is difficult money-wise, like what would it be? Or how do you respond to that?
Yeah, well, my intent with the Front Porch Forum post was not to say, like, oh, I'm going to make all these magical things happen. My intent was to sort of announce I'm running for select board, and then to name sort of these are the things that feel important to me in the town, and if I were elected, these are the things that I'd be hoping to do work around moving forward with. But I didn't want to sort of act like, oh, and it's all going to be totally fine, and I am going to make all these things happen and it will be magical. I wanted to be clear that I understood that it wasn't as simple as just posting on Front Porch Forum, I'll do these things and then they'll all happen. I wanted to be clear that there were tax implications, and I was aware of that. So that's sort of was the intent of my post. I do think that actually at the Planning Commission meeting last night, they were talking about the desire for developing municipal water and sewer to allow development to happen, and they were talking in particular about the commercial district and Riverside. but in that conversation, a woman who I don't know, I was on Zoom, so I didn't get her name, but was on the planning commission. Oh, it might have actually been the town planner, now that I think of it. I think it was Linda, who said that she was talking to somebody else. And I want to say Waitsfield, but I'm not sure about that. But a town that was doing a municipal wastewater system for 300 units, and was going to have zero effect on the tax bill. Going to have no effect on the tax rate, which is definitely like pie in the sky and very hard to believe, but that tells me that there are systems in place to make these things happen, to create the things that the town needs without it being coming out of the taxpayer's pocket directly. Now, to be very clear, I'm not at all promising to make all those things happen and affect no one's tax bill. But I do think that Linda, is it Linda Blasich? Linda Blosh, who knows what she's talking about, said that I think it was Waitsfield was able to do this big project and not impact taxpayers. So I think that these things can be done. It takes work, for sure.
How about you, Joe? Did this make you think of any big visions that you had before joining the select board and things that could be improved in town versus the bottom line? Or
to be very clear, I really don't have any distinct vision or agenda for Jericho. My mission is to serve the town and what they need and what they provide us that they need. Regarding wastewater, water, community systems on both sides, issues that we have to pick up. I also know what Linda talked to me about the same thing with Waitsfield. But I also know that Westford tried to do a community wastewater system for 10 years. Actually accumulated roughly $4 million, and they had to go to a bond vote for $400,000 to finish it, and it got voted down. So, there's successes and there's not successful things that happen with that. I'm more of a pragmatic person. I like to look at bang for your buck as a town resident across the board. Wastewater is definitely needed. But if you look bang for your buck, community water and extending community water frees up a lot of real estate for density and is far cheaper. Mainly because if we do community water, we already own or have use of the road to run the water line in. If we go community wastewater, we got to procure the land to begin with. And if you're looking at a commercial lot that you want to procure for a wastewater, it still has that value as a commercial lot. You don't get a break on it. So unless someone gives you something, you're already running up a steep incline. So again, I'm pretty pragmatic. I like to look at the information. We're fortunate we have lots of studies, and we get fed a lot of information between bike paths, sewer, and so on. So I appreciate that. But most of my decisions that I look for are based upon the information from the studies.
and how about you, Erik, on the pragmatist, idealist continuum? As a select board member, where are you falling these days, and what would you do in your next term?
So I'm definitely a pragmatic person, and I like to look at data, and I like to see what solutions there are and work with people that know what they're doing. You know, I don't know much about wastewater planning. I don't know much about a lot of things, to be honest with you. But I am good at listening to experts who do, and really just taking their advice. You know, the big thing, I'm just going to go back to affordable housing. To me, the thing that's going to help us get any of this stuff done is to just get more residents. We need more kids in school, and so the thing that I'm almost 100% focused on is whatever we can do to get more residents, and especially younger families that are starting out with kids, make that so it's not, you know, as Peter mentioned, it's almost impossible unless you come from money now. So I guess what I'm saying is if wastewater is the answer and we've got to go after that 100%, because maybe the zoning regs don't get us to where we need to be, then that's what we need to do. If it's water, I guess I don't particularly care which one achieves that goal. And you know, I suppose the challenge is there's a lot of different opinions on how you achieve that goal, even amongst experts. So
again, I ask if anyone else out there has a question before. I got a whole bunch more lined up here on my notepad. So I have a question about community spirit and ethos and feeling in Jericho. And that can, I guess, depending on where you're coming from, that can come from a lot of different places. And I wanted to ask each of you, and I guess as a Jericho resident myself, where you think Jericho lies on the community continuum, with like 0 being like horrible community spirit and nothing going on and nobody connected to each other, and like 10 being, or 11 being like, boy, everybody's like always running over and helping their neighbors and knows their neighbors and interacts with the people in the town and knows the people, comes to their meetings, and like, I don't know, I'm just like, it depends on what your idea is of community. So where do we stand, and kind of what do you think could be improved in that area? And I guess because I'm staring right at Peter, I guess the teacher might have some thoughts on that.
Yeah, for sure. I'm not going to give you a number and name our community spirit level, but I will tell you that I have trouble talking to people who I'm not like. I have trouble talking to strangers. I often will have my wife come to like parties with me to help me facilitate my interactions with other people. I think we have an unbelievable community spirit in this town, and there's sort of the two things that, when you started talking, that jumped out at me. One was in 2001, our house burned to the ground, and we were way up in Maine, 10 hours away, and by the time we got home from Maine, someone had set up a sort of a watch, had our neighbor watching our house to see when we got home, and by the time we were home, within 2 minutes, there were 3 people who were there at our house to kind of help us just deal with what was unfolding before us. Somebody else had put a $300 credit on our account at Jerry Hill, and somebody else had dropped off a hockey bag full of new clothes for us and our kids. And that spoke volumes to me. Gay Simonton and Chuck Lacey had set up their mother-in-law apartment, their in-laws apartment, set that up for us to have a place to sleep that night. So before we even got home, the community had 100% taken care of us, which was shocking and wonderful. The other piece, for those of you who are on the internet, there's a Reddit, which is an internet, which is a social media basically. There's a Burlington-based internet, subreddit conversation. There is, but somebody posted on Reddit, who is the unelected mayor of your town? Meaning, like, who's the person that everyone knows that is just the guy around town? And I started scrolling through it, and somebody said, I'm from Underhill, and there are these 2 guys who have this electric wheelchair who roll up and down the street at our house, and one day they'll have a couch on it, one day they'll have 2 chairs facing the wrong direction on it, one day they had a 6-foot table across it. Those are the mayors of my town. And I was like, hello internet, those are my children. So, and following that was a whole bunch of like, oh, I know those guys, I see those guys, that table thing is amazing, that wheelchair is incredible, that guy fixed my bicycle for me. So I showed the boys, who they didn't really care. I said, guys, you're on the internet, like, you've arrived, you are important. So those are sort of 2 things that sort of warm my heart when I think about Jericho as a community. Sorry for that long-winded answer. I just love those.
It's great. Well, this will be good for our archives. How about you, Eric?
It's funny you asked that. That is definitely something that I wanted to improve while I was on the board, and I don't think that I did. When I think of like the pet parade, and as silly as that thing is, it is such a cool thing, and I definitely envisioned finding a way to get more of those things. And certainly got overwhelmed by how much there is to do to just keep things running, and not, we don't end up with a lot of extra time for, just like, okay, select board meeting, we got through our thing, but now there's some time, to start thinking about some of these proactive things. So 1, I think we do a good job. I think we can do more of those types of things. And 2, we need to find a way to find the time to spend on things like that.
Yeah, it seems like parades go a long way from our point of view because we always film them, and Pet Parade has been at the top of the views on more than one occasion. Thank you, Aaron, who's out there. How about you, Joe? Community in Jericho.
I actually think it's pretty solid. I can tell you, although I've been at it for probably 5 or 6 years, from youth sports, the community that and how we interacted and the smiles on kids' faces coaching soccer and hockey and so on was always good. I also look back at the Rossens farm, the collapse of the roof, how we came together to raise a fund to get that back up. I think the Davises had the same situation, the Davis farm. We also do a great job moving forward with creating parks and happy places for us. The Jericho Land Trust does a wonderful job of providing great places for us to go. So as far as the health of happiness, I think Jericho is good. Most of the time I'm at Jerry Hill, people are smiling and asking questions and talking. You know, I think it's a happy community.
So going from the happy community, can we talk about the garage thing that's coming up for election in this year's town meeting day? Can we talk a little bit about that? Do you want to say your opinion about the town garage bond vote? Starting with Peter, who's...
Sure, I'm without a doubt the least informed about the whole thing because it's being handled by the select board. I am fully in support of the bond and of the need to overhaul the town garage. There was a question tonight, actually, I think it was tonight, on Front Porch Forum, which was not voiced in the most kind way, but it asked a question of like, how did we get here? Basically, how are we all of a sudden realizing we have this disaster I should say disaster. We have this really this garage that isn't working. Why are we all of a sudden having to bond for this? And that's a question I had, which I'm generally not trying to put you guys in the spot, but just a question like, why haven't we been seen this coming? I guess, and that now I feel like I'm flipping the tables on you guys, which is not my intent at all. But I don't know much about it. I mean, if you guys say we need it, like I'm 100% in support of the bond. It needs to happen.
So Eric, how did we get here? And we know it's your fault. No, I'm just kidding.
So, I mean, it is our fault. So I don't know quite how it got to the point that it got. It was certainly obvious that we needed to do something. Wayne was very good at starting to put feelers out there. We thought we had more time. We were sort of thinking, and Wayne said this in public many times, so I'm not like revealing any deep secret. He was good. He said it at town meeting. He said it in public session. We've got to start thinking about this. In the back of our mind, we were trying to time it so that the bond that we took out to redo this building would be going out right around the time we would need that. So we kind of thought we had until 2028, 29, something like that. And to that person on Front Porch Forum tonight, it is a good question. Agreed about the tone, perhaps, but we have been fixing things. We have been dealing with some of the things along the way. But one of the things that we have been needing to do was, we've got to get an assessment. We've got to get a professional assessment. We go over, we hear from the road crew. We definitely ran into a heating situation last year. Took way too long to get that fixed due to supply, all sorts of stuff you run into trying to get things like that fixed. So it's not like it is neglected. We do have a fund that don't quote me on, I don't have it in front of me, but I think it's $25,000 a year that we put towards that particular building's maintenance. Please don't quote me on that if it's wrong. So how did it get that bad? I don't know. We weren't expecting the report to come back quite as scathing as it did, is all I'll say about that. That said, it's there, and we said, okay, then this is not okay. It's not okay that we're asking our employees to work in that situation, and we need to accelerate the bond vote, despite the fact that it's not the best time to be borrowing that kind of money. So I do strongly support it, and I think it's the right thing to do.
how about you, Joe? Any more words before town meeting day about that garage vote, and what have you been hearing from people and saying to people about that?
I very much support the bond for the garage. We've had 2 open houses. I've been there for both of them. Had really good conversations with Fletcher and Bob McGee, some of the history and so on. As far as how we get here, that's always a tough thing to answer. You got to keep in mind that, you know, as you progress in one spot long enough, you start to see things or not see things. You know, it's like your house. You know, I can tell you, you know, I redid my house in 2004. Well, I'm starting to walk by, and you see it so much, you start saying, all of a sudden you look up, well, oh, you know, the trim board's starting to rot. Well, why didn't I see that? Well, you see it every day. You know, these guys drive the same truck in, the same bay all the time, and it isn't, they become somewhat used to it. So I can see how that situation can occur, and I applaud Wayne for bringing it to the forefront. That was really important, and I had no idea. Again, I had no reason to venture the town garage till we had the open house. So I support it. I mean, when we think about the importance of the road crew and the snow plows and so on, and taking care of our roads, you know, get our kids to schools. They put us to work. They make sure we can get to our places for ambulances and fire trucks and so on. The town garage is at the top of the line in necessity, and making sure that it protects trucks. You know, one truck is $250,000 now plus. One truck. We should be protecting our investment as best we can to get the most use out of those trucks. So, I mean, those are my thoughts on how we got here and what we need to take care of.
So we talked about community and we talked about roads, and that kind of combining the two in here. I was curious, like when you're not in Jericho, and maybe let's say you're in Underhill or you're in Burlington or who knows, in another state, how you would describe this community? Like, how do you see Jericho? Like, do you describe it as like a bedroom community to Burlington? Or I'm just curious how you see your town. And I guess I'm gonna give you a minute, and whoever's ready, just jump in. Sorry, that wasn't on my list of prepared questions.
I mostly just tell people it's kind of weird that we have 3 centers. I've lived here most of my life, and I still find it a little weird that we have 3 centers. But how would I describe it? Yeah, it's a bedroom community. I guess what I always say is it's kind of perfect in the way that we're really close to Burlington and a little bit more civilization, and also really close to less civilization, really close to the mountains, and we just kind of live in that perfect little, like, if you want to go like do some stuff in Essex and whatever, it's right there. But if you want to get out where you're on a road where you're not going to see anybody, that's not too far away either. So that's generally what I tell people that don't live here.
Yeah, I was just curious, like, how you see it as evolving. Like,
where's it going to go?
Yeah, like, where are we going towards? Like, are we becoming more like Williston or less? You know, I'm just curious how you see it. Yeah.
I think we become somewhere between Essex and Underhill, which is exactly where we sit.
How about you, Joe?
The possibility of us becoming Williston or Essex and so on is honestly quite slim, because we don't have community wastewater system and of that size. Remember, those communities have a dedicated wastewater system. You know, we don't have that, and the chances of getting a full, you know, wastewater treatment plant because of the EPA rules probably never going to happen. So the only way to get Williston and Essex and so on is have that capacity. We don't. So will we ever get there? I don't think so. But I can say that we can become a better community in regards to offering services a little closer to us. One of the reasons that my wife and I really love living here is we both grew up in a very rural area. Getting something sometimes was a real chore, you know, or you had to wait a day or whatever. I like being on the edge of Burlington and knowing that my kids had services and cultural stuff that we never had, but still minutes away from the base of Mount Mansfield. That's why we love Jericho, and I like to see it stay like that. I like to see that maybe some opportunities for affordable housing or smaller condensed things within our villages and so on. But, you know, this is what appealed to Jericho for us, and if we have growth, I want to see it kept local, so we still have that feeling of being on the edge of Chittenden County, not completely in Chittenden County.
How about you, Peter?
Yeah, I agree. And when we bought our house in 1992, we were very aware that we were like 25 minutes from downtown and 25 minutes from Smuggler's Notch and 15 minutes from the base of Mansfield to go hiking, that we really had that sweet spot of being able to access services and get out of, get out into the real country really easily, quickly. And so that sort of was a big piece of us settling here. I do feel like at this point, it feels like what's next for Jericho, to my mind, or what I would like to be next for Jericho, is more locally owned services. I think that the fact that Palmer Maple set up the Maple Creamy with their maple home-based maple factory, and they put in their creaming machine and basically shut down Old Pump Road because people want to be together so bad. I mean, that place was crawling with people. And we don't have a lot of places that can happen. And that's what I really want in Jericho, is more places where people can just go and spend $6 on a creamy and then have 25 minutes sitting on the porch, watching cars on 15, watching kids riding their bike on Old Pump Road. The sort of a reason to get out of our houses, get Netflix turned off, and get out with each other is what I really want for Jericho in its next sort of. That's where I'd love to see it heading. I think that there's lots of places that can happen, or there's lots of potential for that kind of thing to happen if we have local people who are motivated around that. I mean, and again, it comes back to need a person who's going to say, yeah, I'm going to open this bit, I'm going to open a coffee shop, I'm going to open some sort of local gathering spot. But that's what I really yearn for our town, is a gathering spot. So
I wish I could close with just the image in winter of us out on the porch having creamies, but I can't, because I promised that everyone would get last round to kind of tackle, any last points, stuff that maybe people have been talking to you and then found out you're running, or being on the select board. If you want to just kind of take the last word here as we close, and maybe I'll start with Joe in the middle.
I just talking about myself and thoughts like that.
Or stuff people keep talking to you about. We'd love to hear that if we didn't get to address it today in this hour.
So basically, people talk to me about the development-wise in Jericho. But then again, I'm surrounded by that. That's my job. I work for civil engineers in land development. So we live and breathe it. And my wife can attest. I bring it home, and I talk about it at home because I really enjoy what I do. So I guess in closing, I love what I do greatly. I live it, I breathe it. It's not just work. I bring it home with me. I bring it to the town. I really want to serve the town of Jericho in the best way with a skill set that I have, that I feel comfortable sharing. And that's kind of my intention. I want to try to help the residents achieve their goals through whatever they have in the town plan, whatever the DEI wants to do, whatever the affordable housing wants to do, and the energy, and the trails. No, it's not the trails anymore. It's bike and
I forgot
pedestrian,
the name of it.
whatever.
It's very long.
My goal is to assist all these nucleuses of ideas to get where they want the town to go, the best I can. Okay.
So how about you, Peter? Any stuff that we didn't get a chance to talk about that people have been sort of hoping that you'd bring if you were in this select board seat?
I had two things, and then I got wrapped up in Joe's talking and forgot one of them. So
I probably exceeded the 3 minutes on that one too.
The big thing that I've been talking with people about, and people have been bringing up to me, is that it's hard to do business. It's hard to do forward-thinking, proactive, planned-out business on the select board with a 3-person body. That you're basically trying to do all this work in hopefully only 3-hour meetings twice a month. And I think that the town is reaching a size where the select board needs to be thinking about what is next. And I think that the way that I see that happening, or a way I see that happening, is to expand the select board to 5 people, so that, well, first of all, Joe and I could both serve on the select board together. And then Joe and I could talk outside of meetings and say, let's walk through Riverside, let's walk in front of your house and think about that path and what makes sense, and sort of come back, take a project, own it, bring it back to the select board with ideas, and getting more work done outside of those 3-hour meetings. I just, the idea of being elected and then not being able to talk to Eric and Catherine outside of meetings feels like a huge handicap to the select board as a force for leadership in the town, rather than just sort of back on your heels, needing to always react to things like Raceway Road needing to be paved or not paved or whatever.
And how about you, Eric? I'm giving you the last word here, so.
I sort of forget the question.
Is there stuff that, if there's any last points that we didn't get a chance to discuss that constituents have been bringing to your attention?
So what I hear from the town, we have a lot of really good folks that volunteer for the town, and I should have talked about that when you brought up the community. I think the fact that we have, the number's got to be over 50 people that volunteer, so I think that must up our score. So what I hear from those boards, from those, when I am allowed to talk to them, what I consistently hear is, how do we add capacity? And government capacity to get things done, some of these things that need to get done. And so we did put a line item in the budget this year for the first time towards adding some sort of staff. We don't know exactly what that might look like, where that makes the most sense. We are having an audit done to kind of inform us, should it be a planner, should it be a grant writer, I don't know. I don't know what that thing is, but something to sort of help us start getting to that trajectory, to just start dealing with some of these things that we'd all like to see happen.
Well, that just gave me about like 5 million more questions, but we don't have time for that. And thanks to people who have joined on Zoom and are here in person. And thank you to Verity for running the Zoom meeting. And MMCTV is going to be editing this and making this available, because we really want to help people when they're trying to decide to vote, to not just look at names on the ballot, but like see what people are about and where they're coming from on different issues. And this was far too friendly for a candidates event, but thank you for making it so, everybody.
It's a nice town.
Right, exactly, yeah, that strong community.
And we will be streaming this on, we will be streaming Town Meeting Day live, and this year we're adding a special stream inside MMU. Well, actually the school's doing it in the library, so that if people that sort of need a quiet way to attend Town Meeting Day, in a more, maybe slightly more private way than being just in the auditorium with everybody, they can do that. But it's not interactive there. They'd have to go into the auditorium to comment on things. So thanks to everybody for watching, and I guess that's the wrap. So thank you.
Thank you so much for doing this. You don't need to do it. It's like extra stuff. I think this is great to have had it. And honestly, it helped me cement some of my thoughts just having this conversation with the 3 of us. So I really appreciate you making this happen.